Hello and welcome to this ICANN Media Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Hislop. Today, we're going to speak with Peter Howard in Calgary. He is the president of the Canadian Energy Research Institute. Now, his group recently did a report on the benefits of the oil sands for both Canada and Alberta. He joins us now from his office in Calgary. As I mentioned, perhaps, Peter, we can start off with you telling us a little bit about your organization.
CERI itself is a economic entity or a research institute. We specialize in the analysis of applying economics and trends and forecasting analysis to hydrocarbon developments, primarily in Western Canada, although we do on the odd occasion look at other hydrocarbon resources either in the Northern Territories or on the east coast of Canada.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. Perhaps now you can tell us a little bit about the report that just came out this month.
Okay, this is actually an update report to a report we did in 2010, where we looked at the economic benefits of developing oil sands developments in Alberta and the effects of linkages to other provinces and to other sectors within Canada. At that time, and this probably doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but at that time, the oil sands sector was included as part of the mining and extraction sector. This is the way StatsCan originally configured their data capture. In this update, StatsCan has separated or disaggregated the oil sands sector into its own sector. So now we get a true representation of the relationship between construction and operation of oil sands projects and its relationship to manufacturing in Ontario, employment in British Columbia, or goods and services from Eastern Canada. So I was restating the facts, so to speak. What we discovered is there was a couple things. First of all, rather than assuming that the long-range oil price was going to be in that $100 barrel level, we took a more conservative view, and we're using an $85 long-run barrel. And trust me, we did not foresee the oil price dropping below $80. That was strictly by accident. A couple things that the obvious being that GDP will grow, taxes will grow, royalties will grow. That's all part of the study. But the one interesting point that I find was a real eye-opener, I guess you could say, for the report, is with this new disaggregation of the oil sands, it now clearly states that the economic impacts spread across Canada, not in Alberta, but across the other provinces, now exceed 11% of the total benefits.
Now, it's not at all surprising that an organization that is funded by both the Canadian and Alberta governments, as well as the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, is going to come out with a report that's favorable to the oil sands. But from what I understand, you didn't use your own figures, did you? You used numbers from Stats Canada.
Correct. These are government numbers. Anybody can go look at these darn things. We use a special subset of it because it fits into the model that we have developed. It's an economic input-output model. That particular model does have some assumptions into it, which some people may say are hedging the bet, so to speak. But in actual fact, it is a linear representation of the Canadian economy today and what it could look like in 30 years' time.
So what do you think it looks like then if, say, critics of the oil sands get their way and hinder expansion up there? What sort of an impact would this have on the rest of Canada?
Well, if you use this report as kind of the starting benchmark, you can sort of see or suggest that what is envisioned in here as growth would not be attainable if in fact, access to markets was unachievable. Now, with that being said, let me emphasize that I think if in fact a person believes that the demand for crude is going to continue to grow in the future, and if you believe that in fact these pipelines that have been proposed are the best designed pipelines anywhere in the world, then eventually, given time, they will pass the scrutiny and actually be built and constructed. That will then give the oil sands, Western Canada crude, including the oil sands, access to global markets, which is what really needs to happen. And if you were to assume that none of the four major proposed pipelines were to be constructed, then you could suggest that the economic benefits would actually plateau, and there would be economic growth which would be would not appear in the Canadian economy.
Now, in the past couple of months, there have been some companies that have actually come out and said that they are rethinking their development or delaying expansion. How would something like that impact the findings in your report?
With any kind of development, when you're involving upwards of 30 to 40 players, the fact that a couple pull back, not surprised. What I would suggest is that if the oil price continues to stay below this $80 level, then I would say that probably some of the projects might see their timelines pushed into the future. In other words, they're going to get delayed a little bit. But let me just suggest that there are projects under construction today which would total an additional, I think it's around 250,000 barrels of production coming online in the next 2 to 3 years. Those would continue. You can't stop a project halfway through. But definitely for some of the proponents, low oil prices would see possibly a slowing down of their activities.
Your study, of course, while it talks about the financial benefits to both the country and Alberta, it also talks about the workforce. How do you expect that to change over the coming years?
Yeah, there's actually two components here. The report suggests that the current labor requirement in the oil sands is around 140,000 jobs. We actually went to 4 different sources to verify that by kind of doing head counts, if you want to use that term. We came up with a number of a little over 132,000 jobs. When you add construction crews on the ground, turnaround crews, well drillers, modular construction crews, and stuff like that. So all I'm getting at there is the actual head count supports the model in its interpretation. Now, on a go-forward basis, again, if you believe that these projects will advance as described in the report, then that direct employment in Alberta is going to grow to 180,000, I think the number we show. But more importantly, and this is what I need to emphasize, is across Canada, if you add up direct, indirect, and induced employments, that's going to grow from 500,000 jobs today to over 800,000 jobs in the next 15 years.
Do you think this report is something that can actually help benefit the oil sands at a time when a lot of the conversation surrounding the region is negative?
I think you could imagine this being used as sound bites. These are all, I think a lot of people understand that if you're building industrial projects, there are benefits in the sense of employment and GDP and stuff like that. This just puts a level to it. But at the end of the day, it really needs to involve industry, government, and the citizens at large to come to some kind of understanding on how Canada can move forward and develop its resources in a global context.
Peter, thanks very much for your time.
Okay.
We've been chatting with Peter Howard, the president of the Canadian Energy Research Institute. If you'd like to learn more about the organization and more about this report, you can check out its website at ceri.ca. That brings a close to this edition of ICANN Media's podcast. I'm your host, Rob Hislop.